Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to thank the City of Champaign staff for opening their facilities to us. We'd like to thank our sponsors and panel members, State Representative Carol Ammons, State Senator Scott Bennett, County Board Member Mike Ingram, Cunningham Township Supervisor Danielle Chenoweth, Dr. Moore of the Champaign County NAACP, Minnie Pearson, President of the Champaign County NAACP, Marlon Mitchell, James Kilgore, and Marcel McNutt of First Followers. And thank you to the Brothers of Zeta Phi Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. We'd also like to thank and recognize our elected officials in the room who are in attendance. If you are here, please stand. Thank you. As you take your seats, I will explain how tonight is going to work. Tonight's forum will focus on community questions and engagement. Each panel member will give a short statement to introduce themselves and their work. The rest of the time will be given for the audience to ask questions. If you have a question, please quietly line up behind the microphone right here. If you have a question, please quietly line up. We have provided pens, note cards for people to jot down their question. So if you don't forget them, this evening we will be timed by artist James from the NAACP and Amy Felty. They're down here in the front. We ask that everyone respect the limited time we have in this space so everyone may speak and ask questions. I'm going to give a short bio for each of our panelists up here. I'm going to start with Representative Carol Ammons. Carol Ammons is our state representative of the 103rd District. Among her many credentials and achievements, in 2017, Rep. Ammons was appointed to the Illinois Supreme Court Commission on the PreTrial Reform. For the past 2.5 years, her criminal justice reform policy has been aimed at reducing incarceration at the source by fixing our state's pretrial practices. We have Mike Ingram, County Board Member. Mike Ingram has spent the greater part of 2 decades advocating for the arts and working with various non-for-profits like A Woman's Place, Races, Courage Connections, and more. He currently sits on the board for the CU One-to-One Mentoring Program and is also in his 4th year of mentoring at Central Freshman. Visit Champaign County and 40 North, the local arts council. Mike Ingram is currently running for Champaign County Recorder. Danielle Chenoweth has 30 years of experience in the community, organizing and change-making. She currently serves as Cunningham Township Supervisor, supporting the lowest income residents of Urbana, and on the boards of the local Housing Authority and Public Health District. She led successful national and state-based campaigns for prison phone justice as the organizing director for the Center for Media Justice, as well as the campaign to pass the local Community Radio Act through Congress. She is dedicated to practicing in politics of love to assert bold policy for social equity to all. We have Dr. Thomas Moore. Dr. Thomas Moore is retired faculty member of the University of Illinois Department of Psychology. He was the director of the Psychological Service Center. In 2018, he chaired the NAACP Criminal Justice Reform Report, Criminal Justice System Reform Moving to Transformation with Dr. Preston Williams, Reverend Dr. Janet Elaine Guthrie, Pastor Amy Thorin, Mr. Kyle Patterson, Mr. Artist James, Ms. Amy Felty, and some of whom are in the audience tonight. We have Marlon Mitchell. Marlon Mitchell is a longtime resident of Champaign, and in 2015, he founded First Followers Reentry Program. He is a doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois, where he research focuses on educational programs. He has an advanced graduate certificate from Northwestern University, where he studied public policy analysis. He is an advocate for criminal justice reform. We also have Marcel McNutt. Marcel McNutt is a resident of Champaign, where he has been in the community working with youth in various capacities. He is a trained circle keeper that focuses on restorative practices. His mission is to help the youth build critical thinking skills in order to deal with pressures they may encounter. Marcel currently works as a peer mentor for First Followers Reentry Program, where he uses his lived experiences to guide others. I am Tatiana Ammons. I am running for County Board in District 11 in Urbana, as well as Precinct Committee Woman for Cunningham 6. I am also the liaison for the Census 2020 for Representative Carol Ammons' office. Tonight, I will be assisting in timekeeping and chairing the panel. Thank you all for coming out. We're going to start with our panelists giving their first statement. We're going to start with Representative Carol Ammons.
Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana. You did a very good job. You guys give her a hand. She was a little nervous about doing that, and I kind of recruited her and said, hey, you can help us facilitate this, and I think she's done a great job. Thank you all so much for coming and filling this chamber. This is a very important conversation, and certainly thank you to my partner in Springfield, Mr. Scott Bennett. He and I talk about, I always call him and say, hey, you want to do this thing? And he says yes every time. So I thank him for doing that, and as well as the NAACP in the absence of our president of the NAACP, Ms. Minnie Pearson, who is right now at another meeting for Unit 4 schools at IPA. And so this evening, at the time of this conversation, our Governor, J.B. Pritzker, released a statement today that part of their administration's goal this cycle will be to really work on reducing and eliminating cash bail. A lot of my work on the Supreme Court Commission for PreTrial Services has centered around this idea that people have the presumption of innocence. And in many cases, we've kind of lost this concept of presumption of innocence, and people have been, in many cases, sitting in county jails across our state for longer than they should be pre-trial. And so pre-trial has impacted the population of our jails across the state in a way that the Supreme Court decided to initiate its own commission. That commission is led by Judge Stuckert. Judge Stuckert's experience around pretrial has been for us researching this issue about 2 years, and prior to that, I worked on pretrial services with PreTrial Institute, Justice Institute in Washington, D.C. We believe that in order for us to turn around the concept of mass incarceration, we have to look at not only root cause solutions, but we also have to look at solutions that are community-based. And part of that process has led us to this point this evening, and I'm very, very glad that you've joined us. What I will do right now is share with you the letters that I hope my staff have made available, but if it's not available to you on the back table, we will make them available to you. These letters have been sent to myself, as well as to Sheriff Dustin Herman and members of the county board. It's important for me to read excerpts from this letter. I will not read the entire letter because of the length of time I have, but I will read a couple of excerpts that are really important for us to consider when we begin to engage about the concept of either investing in jail building or investing in community-based programming. The first letter comes from PreTrial Justice Institute, and it's written by, the penman of this letter is Sharice Fannin Burden, who's the Chief Executive Officer for PreTrial Justice Institute. She writes, I appreciate the chance to offer some thoughts about new jail construction projects happening around the country and in your community of Champaign. Whether it's $47 million or $4,700, every single dollar spent in the name of public safety from taxpayer coffers should be mindful. I highlighted the sections. She went on to say, respectfully, while I am not aware of the process you've used to date, I would urge you to leverage your leadership role in the county to convene a multi-stakeholder group that is inclusive of the voices of those directly impacted by the justice system policies and practices in Champaign. Leaders of the local groups providing services, often informally and underfunded, in the communities in which they reside, as well as the bench and prosecutors. And then ask yourself questions like these honestly. Who is the jail for? What is the purpose of detention? What is the racial composition of our county compared to the composition of our jail? What do we arrest people for most in our county? What are people in our jail being held on or by, charge, money bill, etc.? What are we attempting to accomplish by incarcerating people pre-trial? What needs do they have that the jail is being used to address, i.e., treatment, supportive housing, or the lack thereof? Is this impact of the lack of services being felt disproportionately by people of color and those without a living wage? Does adding services inside the jail help reduce any identified racial disparity? In most jails, 2 out of every 3 people are awaiting trial. Most of them would not be there if they had the ability to post money bond, or if there were services in the county that could provide treatment or housing or employment. We encourage communities to ask the hard questions, consider local values, look deeply at the data, and work collaboratively with those most impacted by the pending government actions to craft solutions. We'll come back to others, and thank you all for coming, and that's my opening.
Yeah, that's right. Get a clap in. Okay, this is a pretty good problem to have, but for anybody who is sitting next to an empty seat, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, we've got a few people that are trying to find a spot. So, if you've got an empty chair next to you, this is lovely to see. Anyway, I just wanted to thank very much everybody in attendance tonight and anyone who follows along with this later or at home. And thanks so much to Representative Ammons and to Township Supervisor Danielle Chenoweth. I'm not sure there are any better examples of who it is that I'd like to be like when I grow up than these two. So as the relative newbie on the stage, I'll try to keep this brief in deference to the magnitude of experience all across it. I'm hopeful that tonight brings a robust discussion that will ultimately give citizens of this county a better understanding of not only the proposal that's been offered to the board, but also the changes that the county, state, and country are going through that will drastically change the needs of our local justice system. As the representative here from the county board, who also happens to be a member of the county facilities committee, hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions about the process thus far and what I see as the best route forward, which largely boils down to making sure that we're paying very close attention to trends in order to keep us from building something that we don't use. Paying attention to trends can also tell us what does need to happen in order to allow the sheriff to do his, or maybe hers or theirs someday, job effectively when it comes to the safety and health of the people who won't benefit from things like cash bail elimination and increased pretrial services. I'd rather see a plan that acknowledges the long-deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed alongside smart remodeling and retrofitting that will allow us to serve the changing census. As the representative pointed out, it's worth noting that just today, Governor Pritzker held a press conference where he outlined some of the criminal justice reforms he plans to tackle in 2020. Those include ending the cash bail system in the state, reforming low-level drug crimes and diverting offenders to substance abuse treatment programs, and reducing lengths of stays by reforming mandatory sentencing. I'm excited to see what these changes I'm excited to see the changes enacted, and I'm excited to hear from everyone tonight. In a metro area where we're adding more uniformed police to our school hallways, which only widens the school-to-prison pipeline, we need to be hyper-focused on justice reforms that can keep people in their homes with their families and in their jobs. Studies ranging from our own commissioned ILPP report from 2013 to the CJCJ PreTrial Services report from 2014, and even data from the Federal Bureau of Prisons all tell us that beyond being good for our citizens, these changes are also more cost-effective. I'd be fine doing it if it was just for the good of the citizenry, but beyond that, this should also be relevant to anyone concerned with saving money.
I hate to break it to you, Mike, but you are grown up. I currently serve as the Cunningham Township Supervisor. I've been organizing for changes in the criminal justice system alongside Rep. Ammons and her husband, Aaron, in the audience for 15 years. We support the poorest of the poor in Urbana, along with my cohort, Andy Kornstrom, in the city of Champaign Township. In the Cunningham Township, we help about 1,000 residents per year. So 1 in 40 people in Urbana we touch in a given year. We help with rental assistance, a bus pass, and general assistance to bridge gaps in employment or disability. So at any given time, my office is working with about 50 to 75 homeless residents in Urbana. I wanted to point out, I put a handout in the back, and I encourage you to pick it up. It's somewhat depressing, but it does lay out in detail the data around gaps in affordable housing and homeless services here in Champaign-Urbana. Last year, a local resident had to work 73 hours a week at minimum wage to afford a two-bedroom apartment and utilities. 66% of Urbana renters and 63% of Champaign renters are considered rent burdened. That means they're at risk of homelessness because they're paying more than a third of their rent. We're not talking 30%, 20%, we're talking 2/3 of our neighbors. Nearly 600 children were registered as homeless. Those are just those who are registered as homeless in Champaign County schools. Yet, interestingly, we have plenty of spaces. And I'm not only talking about in our homes, which we can open to those in need, but also vacant units in the community. So 9 years ago, we had 2,000 rentable, ready-to-rent vacant units. Guess how many there were this last year? 3,000 units. We've seen skyrocketing, soaring vacancies, but our local residents cannot afford these spaces, or they are shut out due to discrimination. About 80% of the households in need of rental subsidies are not served. So I serve on the Housing Authority Board, and we serve about 2,300 households. We have 3,000 sitting on closed wait lists. That does not represent the need because we very rarely open those wait lists, those just sitting on the wait list. I will give you a sense of the demand, though. You all may remember last June we opened the Housing Choice Vouchers, used to be known as Section 8, Housing Choice Voucher list. We had 52 households sign up in 3 weeks. We opened Bristol Place, which has 60-some available spaces. We opened it for 8 hours, one single day. Guess how many households signed up? 900 households signed up. So what does this have to do with criminal justice? The answer is everything. Every week we see our participants booked in the county jail for crimes of poverty. Trespassing, petty theft are the most common. Their bails are in the hundreds of dollars. We as taxpayers pay $110 every night a person is in jail, just for the facility and staff to keep them there, not including the costs of the courts. But the price goes up with time. Criminal records for our participants block their access to jobs and housing. Every day we work with people who are shut out. And I want to give you a sense, we are talking about lovely human beings who are photographers, grandfathers. We worked with a woman who slept outside for 8 years due to severe mental health issues. One man we worked with struggled with traumatic brain injury. Borrowing from Susan Burton, we criminalize people's response to trauma instead of solving the underlying problems. So let's talk about what we could do with 47 or even 24 or even $2 million. Budgets show priorities. That's how you know a community's priority. Look at where the money goes. So for $2 to $5 billion, we could build an expanded emergency family shelter to meet the need. For $1 million, we could purchase and renovate Times, and for $300,000, we could operate Times year-round. I have put out another item called Champaign County Jail, Dollars and Cents. I want to bring a couple of things to your attention. So the proposal on the jail is to build 283 beds in the satellite jail, right? But our average daily population is only 164 from the last 2 years. After bail bond reform, we're looking at no more than 100 people in jail. And I will close with this. So we did a point in time count 2 days ago, right? So basically right now, we got 68 people in jail for serious crimes. They need $10,000 or more to get out. So that might be people we want to look into their situation, right? We got 52 people in jail for small crimes. They just need $2,500 to get out of jail. We had 2 days ago, 90% of the people in jail were waiting trial. right? So they're innocent until proven guilty, sitting in our jail. This is an opportunity cost for their lives, and I look forward to a conversation about how we can fix it. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and certainly thank the panel for being here. I'm going to take some excerpts from the Criminal Justice Reform Report that the NAACP has produced, and it's mostly a document that's an educational document and deals a great deal with national statistics as rather than just local statistics. On the other hand, it's absolutely important that we work at the local level, because that's where a lot of the people who are infected by the mass incarceration and what we can do exist. You know, right now, there is a rent in the criminal justice system, in that fabric around mass incarceration. People are beginning to demand alternatives to this 50-year failure of the punishment model. So one thing that's happening is crime is decreasing. The other thing is happening, people want to move away from the punishment model. You know, in 1931, the rate of crime was about 200 per 100,000, and the rate of incarceration was like 100. Those numbers pretty much stayed steady until about 1964. And what happened in 1964 to make the change? The change was made in 1964 because the presidential election then put fighting crime as a major issue for the nation to deal with. And in the process of fighting that crime, what we discovered over those 50 years is that the high rates of incarceration in the United States and the great numbers of people held in the U.S. prisons and jails result substantially from decisions by policymakers to increase the use and severity of prison sentences. So pay attention to that, the intention to increase these things. So it wasn't that we all of a sudden were infected by a rash of non-compliant individuals, but instead we developed policies and practices that led to this thing that we now call mass incarceration. The crime rate increased pretty rapidly up until about 1990, when we had about 6,000 people per 100,000 who were that crimes were committed. The rate of incarceration followed behind that. It didn't reach that level as quickly, but it did reach the level of 500 people per 100,000. But the rate of crime started to go down, but the rate of incarceration continued. It didn't abate simply because crime was going down. What we find out, though, is that this punishment model, it does not prevent crime, actually, even though we may think it does. The research shows that if you get any effect from it at all, it's no more than 10%. It doesn't prevent crime. It doesn't deter crime. As a society, it doesn't even make us safer. If you were to look at the racial disparity between who's incarcerated, about whites being incarcerated versus blacks being incarcerated, you might be surprised at how wide that gap is. What incarceration does is it devastates our communities, devastates families, and it ruins the lives of individuals. And as Danielle was pointing out, it's expensive. We could be sending these young people to college for the amount that it's costing us to send them to prison. But now, what are we doing about this? One thing that has happened, just an example, is in the rural-urban crime thing has really changed. It used to be that the urban areas were the high rates of crime, and now they have decreased. So let's take New York City, where the crime rate in New York City, the incarceration rate in New York City was about 350 per 100,000. It's down now below 150. Where in the rural areas, it started at around 150 and is now up to about 350. So we have a mirror shift in those in those numbers. There's much more that I can say to kind of set the tone for what this incarceration and our criminal justice system has done to us. But I'll save that, and hopefully we can get to it during the question and answer time. But thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Excuse me. Once again, thank you all for coming out. What I would like to talk about, some of the things have already been touched on, so I'm just going to kind of delve into this. But what I want to bring to the conversation is, my particular program and the inspiration behind how that got started. And it actually was a conversation back in 2012 when there was again, another referendum that they were pushing for at the time, a $20 million jail. That was in 2012. We're in 2020, 8 years later. That figure has doubled. This conversation we're having again. And again, I ravish in coming out and kind of educating the general public on this criminal justice system. So at First Followers, which is a reentry program, which we target those individuals that are returning from incarceration. Those individuals that have been incarcerated for multiple times, for a number of years. But what we've seen in our reentry program is that we are also serving others that are on probation, and then we're also serving others that could use the pretrial services. Because one of the things a few things that we have done at First Followers, and I'd like to consider ourselves as a model program that has spun out of the fight that we put up maybe about 8 years ago about building people instead of prisons. Investing in our community. And to Danielle's point, when you talk about money, you know your community values when you follow the money. And if you follow it very closely, it makes no sense, to me anyway, that I can spend $47 million for a jail that statistically it doesn't make any sense as far as the bed space, right? So with that being said, we had these conversations a while back. We were able to win that fight. First Followers spun out of that. James Kilgore and myself, we've built a program, a model program over the last 6-7 years to address some of the things that we see that are some of the ills in our society as far as behavioral health, drug addiction, homelessness, lack of housing, education, employment opportunities, economic development in your community. These are all things that we can put money and our resources behind, besides a county jail. And I just want to, we had this debate all the time. And to be frank with you, it just makes no sense that I can see someone that comes through the door with a mental health situation, but we're willing to incarcerate that individual instead of providing him the services that he or she needs. We've had conversations where Rosecrance, which is one of the major healthcare, the mental health providers, where an individual has to sit on a waiting list for 6 months to a year before they even see a clinician. That makes no sense to me, but we're willing to carve out $47 million in sake of saying that we need an institution, we need a unit inside of a penal institution. And again, I just challenge the general public just to think about that and just think how rational that can be. Because if you really think about it, if I have a mental health condition, I'm incarcerated, and I get my services within the penal system, but I have to return home, what happens then? I have to go to jail again to be serviced? Let's think about some of the logistics behind that. But at First Followers, one of the things that we've been able to do is be very intentional on what we wanted to do. We knew that workforce development was an issue, so we developed our own program. We knew housing or transitional housing was an issue, so we developed our own program. And a lot of this we're doing with an operating budget that's under $200,000. So imagine if you're given, let's say, 50% of the $47 million to put into the community. But these are things that, it just makes no sense. And whenever I hear or read something in the newspaper or hear it in the media about, trying to, determine what's the next steps, and you're not really convincing me about what a feasibility study that has been done, taking a snapshot a decade ago just to see where we spend our money and who's going in and out of, and building a profile who's going in and out of jail to fully understand the dilemma that we are in, because in actuality, it's not a dilemma. It's just that somebody's sitting somewhere just pushing an agenda. Thank you.
Hello, I'm here to talk about my personal experience in Champaign County Jail. It was dead time to me. I was incarcerated for 3 months for driving on suspended license. And the same way I went in, I came out the same way with absolutely nothing. I was on my way to work, I got pulled over, and I had to do 90 days for driving on suspended. It was dead time to me. Once I got out, I had an apartment and I had a job at Harvest Market in Savoy. By me being incarcerated, I ended up losing my apartment. I ended up losing my job. Due to that, I struggled for 6 to maybe 8 months once I got out on getting a job due to past backgrounds. And it was due to lack of resources for me. It wasn't the fact that I didn't want to do the right thing. So I got pointed in the right direction, and now I'm working with First Followers. And it's been amazing since then. A lot of goals and things that I wanted to do have been met due to the resources that God has blessed me with by me meeting into them. It's been 2 years since I haven't had a license. I now have knocked down the remaining balance on getting my license back. I have picked up a trade on doing carpentry and some housework. I have got a training in a circle for peacekeeping in the community to hopefully guide other young men in the right direction. I think the majority of the problem is not that people commit crimes because they want to do the wrong thing. It's because sometimes they have to. If you're hungry, some people steal to feed them, due to circumstances. But I think if we look to put this money into other uses, it can help our community out. In 2015, it was $32,000. Now it's up to $47 million, I believe. That's $15 more million. If we invest that into our community, I believe we can uplift it. And Marlon, by me being around him so long, is something that he tells us all the time, is invest in yourself. So if we took $15 million and invest in the community, I think it'll help fix the problem.
Thank you, panel, for those statements. Before we start taking questions, we'd like to remind everyone to please be cognizant that the purpose of this discussion is to engage the community in a productive and meaningful way. This is not meant to become contentious. If you have a question, please start lining up behind the microphone. We want to make sure that your comments and questions are concise. We are not timing you, but just keep in mind there's going to be other people that want to ask questions as well. So just be aware that we want to give everybody a chance to get their questions asked and answered. Whoever would like to go first, go ahead and step up to the mic, and we'll take our first question. Thank you. Don't be afraid or nervous. Should I call somebody out? Because I know some people in the room.
Please don't fight
Okay.
over the microphone.
I don't know whether it's stupidity, naivety, or what, but
Oh, no, not at all.
yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead.
stepping up. Okay, I wish the sheriff was here because some of the questions I had was specifically could be answered by him or not answered by him, but it seems that he has bailed himself out, unlike the people who are in detention under his supervision, most of whom cannot afford to bail themselves out. So I wanted to address basically what has been told. There is nothing new in it, but I wanted the Champaign County Board to take a look at previous studies that have been done, reports that County Board had paid for, and see what they have been recommending. This goes back at least to 2011, when the sheriff had asked the National Institute of Corrections to help him close down the downtown jail and also expand the satellite jail. At the time, they came up with a report that admitted that there are needs that require expansion of the satellite jail, but nothing like what we are hearing, have been hearing recently. But what really struck me was that the report said that there are very specific changes, modifications that can be done to close the downtown jail before the end of the year, which means within several months. And what we've seen is that downtown jail is still open, and they are taking the people there hostage, and because they want to expand the satellite jail, which is unacceptable. Another thing I want to say, my own personal...
Let me
yeah.
stop you right
Sure.
there, because I know you have a lot that
Oh,
you'd like
no,
to say,
I
but I do
stop.
want to put a pin in it at this point. Let me just address something you've said.
Okay.
The county board, when I was on the county board in 2007 to 2012, we, under many points, requested outside entities to study the facilities and the situation in Champaign County. And we have multiple reports all the way down to the ILPP report that was mentioned here tonight, that many of the recommendations haven't been instituted at the county level. Have not been instituted at the county level. And that's an important part of this discussion. We tend to think that if we invest a lot of money in the facility, then everything else will get better. In reality, as Danielle mentioned the numbers tonight of who's in the county jail currently, many of them are pre-trial and could have been released until their court dates. So that's an important part of the discussion. Second part is that this panel invited the sheriff, and if you received the initial flyer had him listed.
Yeah.
He initially agreed to be a part of the discussion, but once the information started going out that we were going to challenge this concept, because I'm very clear on my position on this, he decided that he would not join us tonight. It is important that the public reaches out to your sheriff. That's your sheriff. You elected him. Reach out to your sheriff. Reach out to your county board members and have a discussion with them about what you want them to know and what's important to you around this issue across the board. And I think Mike Ingram might be able to speak to whether they have reviewed any of the other reports. I can't speak to that.
So maybe
Whether
we
the
can
county board has reviewed
speak.
any
I
of the
can-
previous
yes,
reports
yes.
in relationship to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, from our end, so we were brought at the facilities, within the facilities committee, the report that everybody has now, the Reef-Stuck report that has now circulated. There wasn't really, I've dug through the ILPP report and looked at others as well because I was curious, knowing that this had been an issue in the past and seeing it come around again, I was curious about things that that I wasn't previously aware of. So I did that digging myself. The representative and other people who've come to speak at public comment have brought up that report and others, and have emailed all the county board members with links to those. Whoever has their own feelings about whether they have time to do that or not, that's up to them. I think it's important to try to get through as much of it as humanly possible, because it's a mountain of data that tells us very specifically what works, what doesn't, and how we can best facilitate any changes that need to happen, but also how we can best serve the people that we're elected to serve, which I think is very important because that does include the people that are sitting in our county jail. And I don't think we need to trade anybody else's opinions for theirs, especially the number of them that are sitting in there because of a matter of $500. So, but I can say that at the committee level, we weren't given any previous reports or anything like that. We were just presented with the newest proposal. So.
Yes, I do, and it's my information is more of from a national perspective, not the local. But this is a reason why you should be concerned about this at the local level. But at the national level, when Representative Ammons talks about pretrial people sitting in prison around the nation, that's about 75% of the people who are in jail. They are not been convicted. So whatever is happening here is being mirrored throughout the whole nation, and it is exactly what is underlying this increasing interest in doing something different about the criminal justice system and moving it to a system that really brings back dignity to people and not be based on punishment, which after 50 years, we should be able to say, folks, this is not working. This is not getting us to where we want to go. And so now to have these meetings decide, what do we need to do differently and or better? I just wanted to add that because I think that's a critical number. Like, I mean, 75% of people are just sitting there because they can't pay their fines, they can't make bail, or whatever it might be, and they sit there for a long time.
My question is, since you sit on the county board, and it's going to take taxpayers' money to build this jail, are they going to do a referendum to build the jail? Or are they going to use the money that was coming in for the nursing home that the people voted for and continue that tax to build the jail? If the people voted for a nursing home, that money had to be given back to the community and have them decide what they want to do with the money, but not the county board to take the money that's going in and the sheriff use it for a jail. Because the people, it was a referendum to do the nursing home. I don't see nobody talking about a referendum to do the jail because I don't think this county would vote to do a jail. So what's going on with the tax money that's coming in for the nursing home that we no longer own?
I very much agree with you when it comes to whether or not the county would vote in favor of a referendum for a jail of pretty much any size. So there hasn't been a ton of discussion yet because I believe the phrase that I heard was not putting the cart in front of the horse as far as trying to figure out how the county would finance something when we don't have a number yet, because it was put forth to us as a proposal that had multiple tiers that we could maybe try to tailor or whatever. So the discussion that and again, I'm on facilities, finance would be where a lot of that would take place. I don't foresee a way that we could do it without trying to have some sort of, countywide vote on. I mean, if we were talking about that magnitude of a number, and again, I don't think that it would potentially even happen. So when it comes to the nursing home tax, I very much am in agreement with you that now that we don't have that, that shouldn't be something that we are doing anything with. I believe the last I heard, we were finishing out some of the things that because there are still financial ties that we have to it, even though we've sold it. There's still some debts and still some things to get taken care of. So as far as I know, that's still being handled. Once that's over, I will happily agree with anybody who pushes for relinquishing that particular tax.
So can I finish?
Yeah.
Well, so when you get done paying the bills for the nursing home money, so what's going to happen with the tax? I know it's a different subject, but I don't want that money available so they can think about using it. So are we talking about returning that money from their referendum, or what the county board talking about doing with that money?
That would be something I would support 100%. I don't recall any particular, and one of the other board members in the room can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe we've had that particular discussion yet. I would like to think that with with the makeup of the board, that would be something that would be amenable to the board.
Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that the last referendum to raise money for jail building lost in November of 2016. 70% of the 83,000 votes cast voted against it, 30 voted for it. So I just want to point out that in some ways, the whole conversation to me feels like a massive distraction. Like you put a proposal forward for 20 million, 47 million, 15 million. You don't have the money at the county level to build that without going to referendum. The last referendum tied the nursing home and the jail together to try to pass that referendum, and it failed by that much. So you don't have a nursing home anymore to tie it to. So in some ways, my statement to the county has been, can we stop with like strange speculative ideas that we could build anything of that size? Because Republicans are not going to support a huge tax, and Democrats are not going to support building a jail. So can we finish the conversation and move on? So the conversation. So here's the piece. The piece really is, let's look at, we need to close the downtown jail. We need to relocate the sheriff's office. And if you look online, you can see a facilities report that makes it very clear that the county is overbuilt. It has been in an era of building buildings for decades. I believe personally that this is a male Republican concept of what government does, but we can argue over that over beers across the street. But I really think that the shift that we need to look at is from, as Marlon put it, we should be shifting from taking care of buildings, especially empty buildings. The juvenile detention center is half full. The nursing home went under partly because it's half full. That courthouse, as much as it is lovely, is opulent. I would like to see an opulent homeless shelter that instead of the opulent county courthouse, right? And so now we're talking about overbuilding a jail that we know, because of bail reform that is coming down, is going to be looking at building 300 beds for less than 100 people in a few years. Like, just, I want to say stop, right? Let's take a deep breath. And let's figure out where are our priorities and how can we care for folks and keep them out of the jail? How can we stop thinking, well, we have mental health issues. Well, let's respond to the mental health issues, which sometimes is building and sometimes is investing in staff and communities, right? So I just wanted to point out that my perspective on the issue, which is that I really find this to be a lot of smoke.
I'm going to interject before you ask your question. When you all come up to ask your question, if you don't mind, go ahead and have a seat so that the next person can come on up, just so we can try to fit as many people in as possible. Okay, go ahead.
So I just sort of want to clarify a tiny bit as far as the sheriff and the beds. The sheriff literally has no say whatsoever in who's at the jail or for how long. The sheriff is just holding people that he's ordered to hold and trying to keep them safe. So I'm curious if people that were invited to this conversation included the office that asks for bail and the people that set the bail, because those are the people that are determining that issue, not the sheriff. And my second question is just, are people really going to focus on, for this purpose, however many beds there are, making sure that that facility is available to provide the things that people need while they are there, to stay safe from people that they have a known dispute with, to get the services that they need, to get whatever programs they can get. But I guess I was a little bit concerned about the tone in the beginning, because the beds and the people there has nothing whatsoever to do with the sheriff. The sheriff, his role is just housing people and providing what they need.
I'm so happy that you said it that way. I disagree, actually. We have sheriffs across the country that we work with that are actual reformers, and they really do work with the prosecutor, the judges, the state's attorney, the state rep, the state senate, to actually create a criminal justice fabric that will touch all of these areas, so that, yes, the people that are sitting in the county jail are there, that are the highest risk people are there. And those who are not the high-risk people that are pretrial should actually be sitting in the community and returning to court by way of pretrial justice services. And so the sheriff has a very intricate role to play in the reform efforts, similar to what happened in Cook County. Sheriff Dart took the leadership role in Cook County and said, we have the largest jail, county jail, in the country. Sheriff Dart said we need to do something about it, went to his state's attorney, went to his Chief Judge Evans, and they worked collectively together to institute pretrial services for Cook County. That didn't happen statewide. And so although it may appear that the sheriff doesn't have the decision-making role, there are many stakeholders at many points in the discussion, but the sheriff is very much critical to what kind of reform comes out of Champaign County, because yes, he is responsible for making sure people are safe when they're in his custody. And many of us have worked for decades around making the county jail safe so we don't have deaths in the county jail. When incidents happen, how do we report that to the state, to the Department of Corrections, to other stakeholders? So there is a fabric that has to be created in order. We need the judges, we need the state's attorney, we need the sheriff, we need the state rep and the state senator who will reform the laws so that people who should not be sitting in custody are not sitting in custody, and that there are community-based options. I think all of those people play a significant role to getting us there. And I think the letter that was sent to Sheriff Herman actually highlighted that from Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch said you have a critical role to play in making sure we protect the human rights of people who are charged with crimes but may not have been convicted of those crimes. And even if they are convicted of crimes and serving less than a year sentence in our county jail, those people also deserve to be protected while they're there. So we are not suggesting that we should not have a decent, safe facility. What we're suggesting is that this overbuilding approach to criminal justice doesn't work. And we've seen that across the country over and over again, that it doesn't work. And so that's why we're asking you all to weigh in on this conversation. And intentionally, I did meet with Julia Reitz, and I did meet with Sheriff Herman and discuss this issue with them as well.
Thank you.
I just got two questions. First question is revolves around implementing more pretrial services in this area, and how that would look, or how that would help to reduce a lot of the population and see what's driving, or maybe we could do a wraparound model to help a lot of these individuals from coming back to the jail. And my second question is, how can we reduce racial disparity in the jail system? Maybe somebody can answer that.
Well, I'm happy to go first. So first, let me just clarify that the Supreme Court should have released its report in December of 2019. It was extended to April of 2020. There will be a report that's going to be released by Supreme Court. Hopefully part of that process is to get rid of cash bail so that people have presumption of innocence and pretrial services are put in place. Now, how they will work in Champaign County versus Cook County, who already has a pretrial services support system there. Right. In my ideal world, there will be a separate entity, separate from the probation department, that will provide pretrial services, meaning if you have a court date, for instance, and your court date is next month on a Tuesday, what date? February 18th, that pretrial service officer will contact you and stay in contact with you to make sure you're clear about your date, make sure that in the case that you have transportation issues, you can still get to your court hearing. Those are the number one reasons people miss court hearings, either is transportation or I forgot.
Yeah.
Or I showed up on the wrong date and it's the next week. Those things happen, or it was the previous week and I missed my court date. Those are problems around pretrial, and so pretrial services will help to bolster that. We've seen it in Washington, D.C. They've been doing it for 25 years. They have a standalone pretrial services agency, and that agency makes sure at some rate of 95% of the people who are set pretrial return to court, because that is the number one issue we hear from the judges, that if we do this, well, how do we make sure they come to court?
Right.
So we would have to put in pretrial services, and that's part of the investment dollars, right? We can invest those dollars into pretrial services in Champaign County as opposed to building out, a larger facility with more beds.
Right.
We can invest those dollars in pretrial services to make sure people can get to their court dates. We have the resources to do it, apparently. If we can build a jail, we could probably invest in our own county pretrial services, but that's up to the county board. The county board has to determine what they want their criminal justice system to look like. And when people say that, well, that's not my job, the county board controls the budget of all of the county departments. That includes the courthouse, meaning the judges, the state's attorney's budget, the public defender's budget, formerly the nursing home, the department heads, meaning the county clerk. Mr. Aaron Ammons is our county clerk. He submits his budget to the county board. All the departments do the same thing. Okay. So the county decides what their priorities are and how they want to spend their money. And this is one of those issues that they have to look at some of the reports and say, what's the best practices that we can implement? As far as the racial disparities, that is multi-pronged. Okay. It is multi-pronged. A lot of this will be first contact with police, and so there's some policing issues around that. We do hope that the Supreme Court will adopt a practice that will allow police officers to write citations for certain crimes that people are sitting in county jail for right now, like loitering. They can go home instead of go to the county jail, for instance.
Right.
We're hoping that there's some significant changes around that. I think the judges are in support of this kind of concept, and we'll probably see some of that come out in the next few months as well.
Okay. You raised another question before you go. You raised the question, so how do we convince the county board to go toward that, to vote for that end?
Organize.
Okay.
Organize.
It's an election. It's an election year, and there are contested races. And we don't always think of ourselves as living in the county because we live in Champaign or Urbana or whatnot. You live in a county. You are a county resident, and you have 2 county board members. You should know who they are. It's very easy to look online, to look at the maps, figure out who. Just even if you're not ready to make a statement, just introduce yourself on email to them. Just tell them who they are, start a conversation there, and then move on from there, and also get to know who's running, because ultimately that is important. And those who do not have contested races, it's very important. They only hear from, as elected leaders, we hear from the people who we talk to every day, right? And so if you don't call us, we don't know what your thoughts are. So it's very important to put that pressure on. And some of the data that we put out today, you could use in those conversations. I just want to point out, because Carol mentioned it, that, when we talk about the ILLP report mentions many, many things that we should do. And just one example is call people before their court date. That was like 9 years ago. Like, just call people before they're, like, robocalls. Don't you all get robocalls at home?
Yeah.
It's not hard. The technology exists. It's not very expensive. I feel like it is indicative of a particular mindset and priority setting that we have not yet implemented in 7 years, calling people before their court dates. Right? So that's one of the things you can talk to your county board members about, because it'll get them to read that report that they have not read. They have not read that report, because if they had gotten to that part, they say, oh, that's something I can do. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to put that in the budget line item, robocalls to people. So encourage you to get involved and engaged in the small and large issues.
The Vera Institute just released a new study with regards to about racial discrimination, and they do it by every county in in the country. And for Champaign, right now the rate of incarceration is like 148 per 100,000. That sounds like not a terribly bad number. However, when you break it down by race, in 2005, that meant that there was 1,300 African Americans per 100,000 versus 53 per white per 100,000 that were incarcerated. And with the new number of 148, that means that in 2015 it was like 501 African Americans incarcerated to 51 whites. So when you look, that number, that first number looks like it's really good. 148, it's not terrible. It's not terrible if you're not one of those people, but it's not terrible. But when you break it down by race, then you get to see the question that the gentleman just asked about this disparity. How intense is this disparity that we keep talking about? And it's very broad, very broad.
Just 1 second. There are some new people that have come in. If you don't mind signing in the back before you leave out, we really appreciate that. We're trying to, of course, find out who was here tonight to engage in this community conversation. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. So my name's Kim, and I'm the director of Rattle the Stars, which is a suicide prevention organization. So anyone in this room, I know a lot of you know that I'm going to come up here and talk about suicide. So I've heard a lot about safety of people in the jail and also about mental health services, but nobody has specifically talked about suicide related to this issue. So nationally, we know that people who are incarcerated in county jails and local jails are 3.5 times more likely to die of suicide than people in the general population. It's a significant risk factor. The issue is that we often attribute that to mental illness. We know that people with mental illness are more likely to be incarcerated. But that's not just the case. So suicide's a very complex issue. Of the people who have died in this country in county jails, died of suicide, less than 40% of them had a previous mental health issue before they were incarcerated. So one of the things that we understand is what, in the kind of suicide prevention world, it's termed the shock of confinement, right? This understanding that being incarcerated is a crisis situation. It is a stressful situation for people to go through that change and that transition in their life. Not just the change in their daily living experiences and their loss of freedom, but also things like the gentleman mentioned, that they lose their jobs, they lose their housing, they lose relationships due to that incarceration. So we know that most of these suicides tend to happen within the first week of incarceration, and many of them within the first 48 hours. So I am getting to a question. So with the focus, in my opinion, misguided focus on mental health services, right, without a recognition of the other stress factors that lead to suicides for people incarcerated, I'm wondering how the county is prepared to pay out the, unfortunately, probably inevitable wrongful death lawsuit for the family of somebody who is going to die of suicide in our county jail. And I guess my second question is, when we defer all the funding for the county jail, we would love to have part of that as well. Please don't forget about us.
So I wanted to come and just say a few words. Also, I wanted to thank Kim for the information that she just shared. But most of you all, CU Citizens for Peace and Justice, we organized around this for many years, and suicides in the county jail was a big issue for us. I will not call out the names of those individuals. I don't want to cause any particular harm to their families if they are listening or watching, but there were several suicides in the downtown jail. And if I remember correctly, when the construction of the satellite jail was put in place, the argument was put forth that it would be better precautions and better oversight, so that would be a preventative, that the facility itself would, the way it was constructed, would prevent suicides from taking place, but that has not prevented suicides from taking place in the new facility that we already have. So I do want us to make sure that we're thinking about what the impact is on the individuals who are there. But I just don't think a facility and the way that it's constructed has actually resolved that particular problem. It's going to be the people who are inside that facility. Do they pay attention to particular things, and do they care to that degree? And I'm not trying to assault any of them. I just want to say that it's not a facility that's going to solve those particular problems. And to young brother Marcel, dead time, as you referred to it, I stand here as the county clerk after coming through so many of the different things that you have described, and I wrote a message. There's a pamphlet called a Know Your Rights pamphlet that is in the back that we have provided. I wrote a message to the individuals because the new law that is in place starting January 1st said that anyone who leaves a county jail in the state of Illinois must have a Know Your Rights voting with a criminal record. That must be provided to them when they leave. So I took the opportunity to put a message to the individuals who are leaving, and it opens up saying, I have vowed to make sure you are not forgotten. Your value to our society in this country is as important today as it was before you were arrested. Your gifts, skills, talents, and virtues are critical to our success as a community and a nation, but they are just tools with great potential if you don't use them, just like your vote. And Danielle was pointing out that there are elections coming up. When you think about your vote and what you're going to do, who you're going to vote for, think about this is about resources. This is about where money will go in your community when you cast that vote. You're thinking about the people who are going to represent you and who are going to carry forth the issues that matter to you the most. Like, do we need to spend $47 million on a jail, or do we need to spend $47 million to make sure that all the children get ESL learning and dual language learning all across Unit 4? Right? There are different things that you could think about where this money is going to go. So when you think about who you are, Marcel, and what you're bringing to the table, I commend you for what you're doing. I thank you for your for grasping on and holding on to the individuals who want to try to give you some direction. And of course, first followers, I get mad respect for everything that you all do. Thank you all for convening this panel.
Thank you. I wanted to just add something before our next person speaks. The Vera Institute, as Dr. Moore pointed out, on the national scope that looks at across the country, they're looking at reform across the country and how this is playing out. In the letter that they sent to myself and to Sheriff Harmon, they said jail incarceration is often framed as inevitable. Incarceration, however, reflects policy choices and priorities. Between 1986 and 2016, the rate at which Champaign County incarcerates people more than doubled. So it doesn't mean we have to keep everybody in jail, it's that we choose to keep everybody in jail, right? That's what PreTrial Services is all about. PJI has been working on this for decades, looking for best practices. Even if you arrested me tonight for taking Aaron's car, I hope he wouldn't do that to me, but if he did, I should be able to go down to the county jail. They charge me with whatever I allegedly did, and I have a good excuse for it, but they still can charge me, and I should be able to go home until my trial happens. That's not exactly what's happening. And when I spoke to the state's attorney about this issue, I asked her specifically, if you look at the number of people on any given day in Champaign County Jail, are you suggesting to me none of those people could go home and come back to court? And she said, no, that's not what I'm suggesting. So we know that we could actually reform the number of people that are sitting pretrial, which would also inform our county board members' decision whether they really need 300 beds or not. Right? All of this is based on data, and we have the data, but we've not made the decision policy-wise to address the issue of incarceration. So I'll just leave it there. I hope that if you want the letters from, that have been provided to me, you can certainly get them from us electronically, and my staff will make sure you can get it. And they're on the back table. If we run out, no worries. At the end, we are happy to get your email and forward them to you.
First of all, I want to thank everybody on the panel. I want to kind of piggyback on what Marcel said. I've been in, because I talk so loud, and that's like I'm screaming. I want to kind of like piggyback on what Marcel was saying, speaking on the building of a new jail. I've been in Champaign County over 5 decades. I've been in and out the old county jail, the downtown one, over several times. And not one time did I go in there and come out and have something different I could do to better my life. My life didn't get better until it was different programs and different things for me to do besides go to jail. Every time I went to jail, I learned a new trade of doing something else I ain't had no business doing. I never went in there and learned that I needed to go to school, further my education, or I needed to go out and fill out an application. I didn't learn any of that. They didn't. In the county jail, I'm in there with people that had been put in there, stuck in there. So what we're doing in that time while we're sitting in there, we're trying to think of a better way to do something different because we're sitting in there, as he said, with dead time. So building the jail, putting more people together with idle time and having nothing to do and saying have a program in there. I've never went to the county jail and there was a program in there besides you going to church on Thursday and Tuesday. It was no other type of program. You did NA maybe if you had substance abuse. Them was the ways you got out of your cell. You didn't get out for a program. You didn't get out to learn something different. Whatever you learn from the next person next to you, and whatever they may teach you, negative, positive, or whatever. You was hoping that it was positive, but 9 times out of 10, it was something else negative because they explaining to you how they got in there and how they gonna do it different when they get out. That's the problem I have with another jail. Because you're not being able to be taught or learn anything different. I love the First Followers program that has been started because if nothing else, if you come down there and give yourself a chance in our program, you're going to learn something different. And you're learning from people that have sat in the same seats that you sat in. We didn't just read no books and we coming to tell you about this is how you do this. No, we actually walked the walks. We actually went to the penitentiaries. We actually went to the jails. We actually sat on the concrete. We actually had to go through the hard times. So when we're sitting there talking to you, we've been able to understand where you're coming from and what you've been through. That's the difference in starting to put some money into some programs, starting to put some money into some mental health, starting to fill out what people really need. Because incarceration, out of all this time, if they do a study of how many people went to jail and got out and was really rehabilitated as they say this is what they're doing, you'll figure out that over 80% of people that went to jail is not rehabilitated. They have learned something different, to do something different that was worse than what they did when they first got in there. And that right there, if you put, I don't want to use monkeys, but if you put an animal in a cage with more animals, they're not going to get out and just walk straight. They're going to be even wilder when they get out because they have not learned anything while they've been there. I just wanted to share that.
Good evening. I'm Vincent Anduho of First Followers. I just have a few questions about the facilities, the present satellite, and what year it was built, and how many beds that it has.
Downtown jail was built in 80. Satellite jail was 96, I believe is I'm looking at my facilities cohort members. Yeah, 96. And Danielle, do you have the number?
Satellite. The satellite has 183 beds right now.
And the downtown?
I was looking, trying to pull the downtown. It's less than that, but
Trying to get a combined number.
yeah. Is it 313 is the combined number. So it's 183 plus whatever makes 313.
Okay,
313 would be the
total.
full number. Do your math.
And so, for clarity, the suggested new $47 million facility will add 300 new beds or add it to the 183 number of the present?
It would the actual number of overall total beds in this in the 47 million version of the project would still be lower than the total now, not by much. I think 13 or 15 was the number. So technically it will lower, just not very much. But so we're talking about total beds at that point.
All right. So we're looking to renew. Is that what their proposal is, to go to a new facility, to upgrade? Is that it?
The proposal has been, when I was on a board and many other county board members, obviously to close the downtown jail because it's old,
All right.
1980s something. But I don't think that's actually the issue. When I was on a county board, we just didn't put any money into maintenance. We didn't maintain, we didn't have a maintenance line item to maintain our facilities, and therefore, of course, if you don't maintain them, the air conditioner goes out, it costs millions of dollars to replace, the roof, all of these things are very, very expensive. And so at this rate, looking at what Dr. Morse showed us, the statistics, and there's a graph, I hope it's back there, for Champaign County, the population has been on a steady decline, and that's a good thing. Meaning the reforms that have been done at the local level, at the state level, has reduced the population of those over the last decade, 10 years or so. So when you and I have a discussion about what is necessary if you close the downtown facility, that doesn't mean I need to transfer almost all 140-something beds, right, out to the satellite. We don't necessarily need to do that. That's what's being proposed, minus 13 beds. But that doesn't mean that that's what you need. And so I think as you look at the data and you look at the decline, right, crime is going down. It's all over the country. People see this. Yet we've not reduced the amount of money we put in incarceration. They are not correlating. So even though crime is going down, incarceration is going down, PreTrial Services are working, criminal justice reform is working, which is great, and we should be all happy about that. The proposal doesn't really acknowledge this shift and this change. And that's what I think stakeholders, community should be talking to your county board about.
Thank you so much. I have another question concerning the facilities. Can anyone tell me when the previous jail was built or was in operation, and how many beds did it have?
I do know that because of Ron's lovely comment at one of our meetings that up until 1980, the capacity of the county jail was only 40. I don't know offhand. If I can look back at him, he might actually know the year that it was built. I want to say the 40s, but that might not be correct.
So there, just so folks know, there used to be a jail where the county jail is now. It was a small building, and next to it was where the sheriff and his wife lived. The wife made the food for the inmates at the jail every day. And essentially, I was just talking with Ron today, and we looked at a News Gazette report where the capacity of that jail was 40. Although the reason the downtown jail was developed was because they were over capacity. They were at about 68. And this is the 1970s. So essentially, we had this, and I mentioned, because the county population has not gone up much. Really, we've stayed pretty stable. That if we look at serious crimes of the people in jail right now, we're talking about 68 people just from 2 days ago based on the bail. I'm assuming the judge is going to set the bail around the severity of the crime. So the numbers of who has been in the jail, who really has been an issue where we may need to look at issues of violence or, keeping folks safe, that we're really talking in that number. And I think that what we're looking at is we've reduced the jail population by 32% in 9 years, right? It's been a straight line. If you look year by year on that graph, it's a straight line. And what Carol is talking about coming down the line with bail bond reform is another 25% plus. So essentially, the thought that we would even be talking, we're building for yesterday. We're not building for tomorrow when we make these proposals.
Well, I think since you've given me this information, I grew up here, and I remember that old jail. I was a kid when I was would frequent the laundromat that was right across the street, and I would see some of those who I knew behind that gate playing basketball as a kid. And what I see today from the 70s now to 2020 is a progressive building of jails here in our county and when you look even further past the county, because I've been here a while, when I go into the rural areas, I see prisons being built. I'm talking about from then to now. There weren't as many when I was a child to now. I mean, if you'll see them right on the side of the road. And so what I'm really looking at from Champaign County and from a mass incarceration standpoint is that it seems as though we would be feeding into that whole system there. So we're looking at a systemic situation by and large, rather than just a local situation, us tying into something bigger than what it is in our own backyard. And what I'm saying is that if we go back and forth dealing with what we should have and what we shouldn't have, because we're looking at it from a really micro standpoint, but I don't think we're looking, or let me rephrase that. It seems to me as if we're suggesting a jail here for a time such as this, that our crime is going down. That means there's somebody who's on board with that agenda of mass incarceration, if you follow me. Because I went from, I'm someone who followed the small jail to the 1980s new facility then to now a satellite. And I remember when they were all three in existence, and now we're suggesting another one. It just seems like we're just continuing on over time to say we need bigger and better, or we need whatever those reasons are. We need health. Mental health inside of these institutions. But what I'm saying is this: when does it end? Are we going to continue to be those who just say, let's lock up our citizens, let's lock up our citizens, let's continue to build bigger and greater facilities so that we'll have room to, because if the numbers say that we have less, crime, then why are we needing more and bigger and better beds? Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you raising that, and part of the letter I didn't read from Vera Institute says there's quite a jail boom happening across the country as county officials continue to prioritize jail construction over investments in community-based programs and infrastructure. Research shows that jail impoverishes people and communities, as our brother demonstrated as he talked about losing his job and his home. Research also shows that economic decline and increased jail incarceration each lead to higher rates of drug overdose deaths, playing an even bigger role in the overdose crises than the prescription rate of opioids. And he said, to put it simply, investment in incarceration has been demonstrated to cause the very problems that we purport to address.
Yeah. Thank
It's
you.
a cycle.
All right, I'm going to interject before Dr. Moore comes on. Just due to time, we're going to probably take two more questions. I do see two people standing up in the back. So if the panelists, can you keep your comments short just so we can make sure we fit these last two people in, okay? Thank you.
Sure. James Kilgore from First Followers. So, I'm sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
I think the last questioner raised a really important question for us as we think about this issue. Crime is going down. I mean, even though the jails never work, they're not responsible for crime going down. And to get a better picture of what this means about incarceration, who's incarcerated, is like, while nationally we have 2.2 million people incarcerated, that's a number of, if you looked at that number tomorrow, that would be a different 2.2 million. So over a year, we have what they call a churn, 11 million admissions to prisons. That's a lot more than 2.2 million. And in addition, there are 6 million people who are under the control of some like probation or other kinds of officers. So that question about if crime is going down, why do we keep doing the same thing? And the rise of rural jails is amazing. And if you think about New York City just closed Rikers, one of the most famous prisons in the country. They just closed it. And what are they going to do? They're going to do job training. They're going to have medical services, drug training. That's how they're going to deal with this, in addition to having very, very small jails. So I think that issue needs to be explored. If crime's going down, why do we keep doing the very same thing?
Sorry, James, if you give me 1 second, just because we're trying to do this quickly. Just back to the same exact point about the facility and expansion or anything like that. I kind of try to tackle it a little bit in my opening statement that, there are still going to be, like, this wasn't going to be building an entirely new space. It was going to be trying to retrofit and then build out. For me, what I was trying to say was, if we're paying close attention to what the needs of the future are going to be, instead of building, like you said, for the past, if the sheriff were here, he would be talking about needs for separation, lines of sight, and things like that. Those are important things for us to think about. What's statutorily required of him, which is kind of why I think why I was kind of alluding to what we can look at if we're talking about less people, but making sure that we serve those less people better than we are now. There are things that we can still be looking at to do that that I think can somehow do better by them, whether it's watchfulness or there has to be line of sight between, or no line of sight available between any male and female prisoners. So right now what they have at the jail is they have taped up newspaper over some of the windows and things like that. It works, but I'm sure that they also put 8 female prisoners in a space that could hold, I believe the last I asked, it was 45 people. So if you had a better place to put female prisoners, or if they were just not there, then you've got more capacity that we're not using right now. So I did think it was important. And also to the point of building jails rurally, that's another part of the systemic racism stuff that we're talking about. And we can do a lot better in that regard, because you're talking about moving a lot of people, particularly black bodies, into areas where they can't vote, but now they are represented by the census. And that is a very big problem that I believe we might be seeing some movement on nationally and statewide soon. But you're literally talking about people that aren't allowed to vote while they're sitting there, but now they're being counted as living in Dwight instead of in Chicago. And that's a very big thing that we need to be taking care of.
Yeah, I'm James Kilgore from First Follower. So I want to just start with one short comment, and that is that I think we should, before we spend $1 on the jail, we should be spending money in the community. We have to flip that script. We can't start with the fact that we have a jail problem. What we have is a poverty, inequality, structural racism problem in the community. So we have to figure out how we're going to solve that. Then we can deal with fixing the jail. Now, so having said that, I want to I know we're in the middle of a national campaign to get rid of cash bail and a statewide campaign to get rid of cash bail. And I think this is really great. It's really positive. It's a way to, reduce the jail populations. But I want to piggyback on what Marlon, particularly what Marcel said about, well, you go into jail and you come out and you're in the same place you were when you went in. And I think this tells us about what a pretrial services program actually needs to look like. That, I mean, so the first thing we talk about is giving people information about when their court dates are, and that's useful. But what we really need to do is figure out how we're going to reshape the structural elements in the community that are driving people into jail in the first place, which is lack of jobs, which is substance abuse, which is mental health problems, which is structural racism, a whole range of those. So what I wanted to just ask you to do, a couple of people, is to let's imagine two things. What does a bigger picture pretrial services program look like besides sending people notes when their court dates is? And second, and I think this is the crucial piece, where does the money come from? How do we get, I mean, we're always talking about, well, there's no money for a jail, there's no money for a jail, there's no money for a jail, but is there money for these other things, and how do we in the community mobilize to get some of that money into those programs and not in the jail? And that's a big, important political issue, which I think if you're going to discuss it in the county board and you're going to come with alternatives, you've got to come with a strategy to raise the money for those alternatives as well. And in 2013, we had the Community Justice Task Force, which Carol Ammons sat on, Senator Scott Bennett sat on, I sat on. We came up with alternatives. Maybe we need something that's going to give us what's that vision of a pretrial services and how are we going to raise the money for that.
Oh, just a second. I'm going to take the last question, then we're going to let the panel address whatever they would like to address for both questions, okay? Just due to time. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sure. My name is Ken Salo, and I teach, and so I'm hoping to bring that perspective. Some of you are fellow travelers. I wanted to just take the minute to add on to what James has said. There's a great organization here that I think its slogan is worth repeating, that the idea is to build programs, not jails, and we should be investing in that aspect. But I wanted to maybe just add 2 points that I think speaks to the question of the racial disparities. I know, amongst other things, people here also radio hosts. They've had a show where they discussed about 400 years on the end of slavery. And I think in the state of Lincoln, as I understand, this is a key state. But I want to suggest with other commentators that, and I think this is worth recalling, the fact of the institution of the prison is evidence that slavery hasn't ended. All right? So for us to imagine a society where we don't need prisons, all right, must mean that we have to go and re-look and rethink about what is the long shadow of slavery within our society. And let's just remind ourselves that people weren't enslaved because of the color of their skin. They were enslaved because it was highly profitable for a minority of people. And so in the discipline that I'm focusing on, the construction of jails is continuing despite the falling of crime, again, because it's highly profitable. All right, so, and I'm glad to say that some of the organizations, particularly in city planning, which is the halls that you are in right now, we are also trying for students to think through what is the purposes of why they are building and constructing. And I'm glad to say within the disciplines of architecture and urban planning, there are people who are now refusing to design jails. All right, there are few people who are refusing to plan jails, and all of this within this prison and jail construction boom, despite the falling crime rate. So thank you very much.
All right, we are going to have our Senator Scott Bennett. He's joined us on the panel, so thank you. Can you please speak to your experience about the Supreme Court Count Commission?
Well, thank you. I didn't know I was going to speak, but I'm glad to be here, and there are a lot of people here. You see a lot more from up here. Yes, so I serve on the same Supreme Court Commission that Representative Ammons referred to earlier. And as some of you know, before I went to the legislature, I worked in the state's attorney's office, and in different periods I work as a defense lawyer as well, so I get both perspectives here in town. And serve on the Senate Criminal Law Committee as well, and see some of the reforms that we've been pushing through that as well. But I will tell you, I've been so impressed with the commission that we've worked with, the Supreme Court Commission, other than the fact that it's once a month in Chicago for 2 hours and parking costs $48 every time you go up. But I always leave, once I've done saying bad words about the paying for parking, you always come away with a feeling of encouragement. It's mostly judges. There's representatives of law enforcement on there. There's several legislators, and that's the goal, right? We're going to write some legislation, then take it and run it through Springfield. But what I think is so interesting is you have judges from all over the state, and their problems are the same. Certainly Cook County has a volume that the rest of the state can't fully, I think, appreciate. But many of them have the same issues with wondering why certain people remain in custody, and finding that even a few $100s can make the difference for some, whether they keep their job or whether they are released in the community. And the question they all have is there really any correlation between that and showing up for court? Is that $100 the reason they show up, or is it because if they go to work, they know exactly what day it is, and they're in their routine? I've enjoyed being on that commission with the representative. I appreciate the chance to speak on that. But I'm really encouraged. When we were on the Criminal Justice Task Force that Dr. Kilgore referenced, that was my big push, because I came from being in the state's attorney's office in McLean County, where they were spending $1 million a year sending people to other jails. They were so overcrowded in the McLean County jail, they were sending them to other jails. So that forced the judges there, that were very law and order at the time, to talk about pretrial services. So they brought pretrial services in from, I think, Kankakee at the time. So we had the whole department come and testify and talk about it. I know Champaign County tried it for a little while. I don't know I don't know they had the best model to run on. And so I was always really encouraged by that to find out what happens when you give people certain rules and then let them go and live their lives in awaiting trial. In McLean County, it was a huge success. It saved the county, obviously, $1 million. And what was interesting was you ended up, when it wasn't the few seconds that a judge has to hear a bail request, right? Where the public defender typically, is a public defender, has had just seconds in a crowd of inmates to say, do you have a job? Do you have family? What do you have? But instead you had a whole independent department researching it. It isn't just the person saying, I've got a job. Now the pretrial services department calls that job and says, yeah, he's been working here for 6 months and we expect him here on Monday or he loses his job. So you have an objective person that now tells the judge that. The judge typically would have a lot more credibility in giving that when they're making their bail decision. So I saw it as a big success in a very conservative county, which was McLean County back then. I'm excited to see the state kind of catch on to that and see where we go from here.
Thank you, Senator. All right, I'm going to give each panel member 1 minute for their closing remarks. We are going to ask Mr. Artist, James, and Amy to keep track of them for that 1 minute. Then I'm going to pass it to Jelani Sadiq. He's a notable member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He's going to give us our closing remarks. We're going to start with Representative Carol Ammons on her closing remarks. Okay, let's start from the other end.
I don't think we need a new jail. When you get out of pre-K, you go to kindergarten. When you get out of kindergarten, you go to 5th grade. When you get out of 5th grade, you go to middle school. When you get out of 8th grade, you go to high school. When you go to high school, you go to college. After college, you get a degree. When you get out of Champaign County Jail, what do you get? Nothing. So you're forced to go right back.
All right, so I think I said, when I did talk a little while ago, when I talked about an agenda, and oftentimes we spend a lot of time debating these different things about, feasibility and cost efficient and all those things, and those things are great, but at the end of the day, there's an ideology that's working in the background that has oppressed certain people throughout history, and that's what I mean by there's an agenda that makes no sense of how much money you spend and where when there's this ideology that's an underpinning of where we are today. So just keep that in mind.
I'd like to read you a quote from Clarence Darrow, a famous lawyer from early 1900s. He was speaking to a jail population in Cook County, and he said, "Some of you people are perhaps plying the trade, the profession which is called burglary. No man in his right senses would go into a strange house in the dead of night and prowl around with a dark lantern through unfamiliar rooms and take chances of his life if he has plenty of the good things of the world in his own home. You would not take any such chances as that. If a man had clothes in his clothes press and beefsteak in his pantry and money in the bank, he would not navigate around nights in houses where he knows nothing about the premise. Whatever, the only way to cure these conditions is by equality." Then he says, there should be no jails. They do not accomplish what they pretend to accomplish. If you would wipe them out, there would be no more criminals than now. They terrorize nobody. They are a blot upon civilization, and a jail is an evidence of the lack of charity of the people on the outside who make the jails and fill them with the victims of their greed. I think that speaks well to Representative Ammons' point that this group, what we need to do is organize, and organize more to address this issue.
I have 2 points. The first is, does the sheriff control the jail population? The answer is, if we look historically, there was a time when both jails were completely full. And you can look at the News-Gazette archive, completely full. We were at the max. And Judge Stefanis made a change, like turning a key on how he did his sentencing. And that jail population dropped overnight. So read your history. The second thing is, where does the money come from? You'll notice that if there's a fight in the school, right, which is a terrible thing, but overnight we find $200,000 to put police officers in the school that just wasn't there the day before, right? So the piece of street in front of City Hall cost $1 million. Every time you choose to build on streets, that's what you're doing. So we make decisions all the time. Money is being exchanged all the time that reflects our priorities. So the second thing is follow the money, learn how to read budgets, and learn how to argue for where you want your money to go so that it helps people instead of hurting them.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks, everybody, for being up here. Something that Tyga asked earlier has kind of stuck around with me, and I guess that's what I'm going to spend my time on. The question was how to end racial disparity, and I wish there was any sort of easy answer to that. Systemic racism factors into the equation for every possible interaction that anybody that doesn't look like me's life. And, you know, paying attention and doing things like this, showing up to things like this, you know, I'm looking at a lot of white faces in this crowd. You know, it's good that you're here, and I hope that you continue to read up and find out things that you might not know right now. You know, across town, they're having a meeting at IPA right now where they're trying to discuss swapping schools with Garden Hills, which will drastically impact the outcomes of the lives of the kids that go to Garden Hills. As Danielle mentioned, the SRO problem in Urbana, and what she brought up at one of the meetings was that creates the beginning of a pattern that they can say, we can look all the way back in your record to when you were in high school. You've been a problem this long. When that doesn't happen a lot of times to kids that go to different, you know, schools that look more like me. So I don't have a good answer. There isn't one, but I do hope that we, as a unit, all keep trying to find it.
Thank you, and thank all of the panelists who are willing to come and serve on this panel this evening. This is our effort to start a conversation that, unfortunately, the government process doesn't allow. We don't have open dialogue and real exchange when you come to see me at the county board, or if you had to talk to me on my way from my office to the General Assembly floor, where we got 5 minutes to discuss an issue. This is where the public gets to come in and really engage with their elected officials, and I hope you will encourage other elected officials not to shy away from this process. It is important that they take a position and that you know what that position is. And so Scott and I have spent a lot of time together, from the county level to the city level to the state level, really trying to get people to engage around very difficult topics, even if we don't agree. I lose votes a lot. I don't know about Scott, but I lose votes, and it's okay. But our job is to look for best practices and remember our humanity when we're dealing with these very difficult subjects. And I hope that people will continue to engage around this subject. Even if you disagree with me, it is important that we tell people what they really need to hear as opposed to what they would like to have done. And I think that that's why we are here. I will be across the street at the Quality Bar for anyone who has additional one-on-one they'd like to do with me. I invite any of my colleagues to join us across the street for a few minutes at the close of this event. And thank you.
Thank you all for allowing me to facilitate. This was my first time, and it was great to sit up here and look out into the community faces. I will leave you with the words organize. Organize, organize. I grew up in an organizing family. So we are an organizing community. Know who's representing you, as I'm a person that's running. You want to make sure that you know, like my mom said, what their position is. Make them stand on their position. I'm going to pass it over to Jelani Sadiq, and he's going to close us out.
Good evening. As I was preparing for this evening, I was finally able to appreciate what our founding fathers meant when they wrote, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. At no point did our founding fathers claim to have achieved a more perfect union, nor did they give us the direct blueprint to create that more perfect union. They did, however, leave us a clue within the preamble, and that's the securing of the blessings of liberty. Liberty, by definition, is the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, and political views. It is with that liberty that we have fought, we are still fighting, and we will continue to fight to improve upon the justice system that we know isn't perfect. The justice system that we know doesn't work for everyone. The justice system that we know has always been unjust. We, with this, fight. And it will take everyone. You, the citizens, you, the politicians, you, the organizers, you, the community leaders, and you, the scholars. We are the tools that we need. And we can enact true and just change. Again, thank you to our sponsors, our panel members, State Representative Carol Ammons, State Senator Scott Bennett, County Board Member Mike Ingram, Cunningham Township Supervisor Danielle Chenoweth, Dr. Moore of the Champaign County NAACP, Minnie Pearson, President of the Champaign County NAACP, Marlon Mitchell, James Kilgore, and Marcel McNutt of First Followers, and thank you to the brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and all of you who have come out to support us this evening. Again, as you've already heard, a few of us will be going over across the street to Quality Bar to continue the discussion, share some food, and have some generally good discussion so that we can do what it takes for a better tomorrow. Thank you.